Okay, welcome everyone to the virtual workshop. I think we can go ahead and get started. My name is Emily Clark, and I'm the training coordinator here at CUAHSI. Today we have a virtual workshop presentation as part of our program on field data management solutions. So this series of workshops is taking place September through October and is jointly sponsored by the LTER Network Office, the CZO National Office, and the CUAHSI Water Data Center. So today we have Jon Pollak with the CUAHSI Water Data Center, who's going to talk about some of the tools that are being developed at the CUAHSI WDC. Next week, next Wednesday, October 1st at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, we're going to have Wade Sheldon with Georgia Coastal Ecosystems Long-Term Ecological Research Information Manager, who's going to give a talk on the GCE Data Toolbox. The culmination of this series of workshops is going to be a virtual poster session. So what we're asking is for the community to submit abstracts to us, and then we're going to set up actual virtual breakout rooms where you can present a poster on any field data management tips, tricks, or tools that you have, solutions that other people can use in the field. So those abstracts, we'd like to have those in by September 30th, and there is a capacity requirement that we need to meet. So get your abstracts in so that we can review them, and then we'll accept the abstracts that we can. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to Jon Pollak from the CUAHSI Water Data Center.
Hello everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Jon Pollak. I'm the User Support Specialist here at CUAHSI. I'm located right across the hallway from Emily, so hopefully if there's any troubles or anything, we'll be able to resolve it pretty quickly, but we should be all set for today. You all should be seeing my slides now. The title of my talk is Cloud-Based Data Publication with the CUAHSI Water Data Center. And what I'm going to try to do today is highlight specifically some of the new cloud-based tools that we've been developing here at the data center over about the past year and a half. In case you didn't know, we're actually located right outside of Boston in Medford, Massachusetts. So if any of you are ever in the area, we'd love to have you stop by the office. My goals for today's talk is to make sure that everybody participating in the call today has an idea of what the data center is and hopefully how we can help you and how you can get involved. Because we are a very open and transparent organization, and we're driven by the water science community. I'm going to talk about data management plans, specifically the ones that most of you are having to deal with coming down from the National Science Foundation. I'm going to touch upon data standardization and sharing, and then how the HIS, the Hydrologic Information System, works. The publication process within the system that we maintain, and talk about some tools that hopefully can help you all do your job better. And then at the end, I'll end with a couple case studies of data publication with the data center. So the mission of the data center is to provide data services for the academic community. And so we really are specializing in data management and archive, as well as access to those data that we store, as well as other data that we actually are not really responsible for. We're just kind of bridging gaps. And to define this mission, we have a community governance structure which directs us, the staff. We're about, I think, 12 or 13 full-time staff members, something like that. But our goals are driven by, first and foremost, the board of directors, which are elected officials from our member universities, as well as the Standing Committee on Informatics, as well as the Users Committee. And I'll talk about those two committees a little bit more in a minute. Again, we really feel as though, and we're really mandated to be a member and a community member, and we're a service shop that provides services, hopefully the important services for the academic water science community. We implement and maintain solutions that are developed within the research community. So I'll be talking about the hydraulic information system today, and that technology was actually developed by researchers within the CUAHSI community. Like I said, we provide data hosting. We do some software development, everything of which is free and open source. So if you're a developer and you want to see what we're working on, if you want to contribute to what we're working on, I definitely encourage you to contact us or at least visit our GitHub site, which is right here. But then we also do some transformations of data, creating new data products such as processing gridded data, gridded atmospheric data, so that it's a time series, more usable format for typical hydraulic research. And we're really focusing on enabling data collection, storage, and reuse. And as we're doing that, we're hoping to enable the investigation of processes at growing scales. And again, I said at the beginning I'll go through some case studies at the end, but at the start I want to give you some idea of who's using our tools and services, and a lot of it is NSF-funded research. Shale Network is a really good example I like to use, which is a research coordination network evaluating impacts of fracking on water resources in the Pennsylvania area. The critical zone observatories are using our tools to get their data out to a wider audience than they otherwise would. And then we've been kind of engaging GLEON, the Global Lakes Ecological Observatory Network, more and more. So hopefully we'll have some of their data being brought online, as well as hopefully, our tools, like I said, hopefully help them manage their data better. Then we also have, individual researchers using our tools on experimental watersheds, as well as some local government and watershed associations that primarily use the system to share their data. Now, the governance of CUAHSI is made up of the board of directors as well as a number of committees. I'm going to focus on the ones that are driving the priorities for the data center, which are the Informatics and Users Committee. And what we have is the Informatics Committee is really focusing on strategic direction and allocating of resources, so they kind of decide what our money is going to be spent on, while the Users Committee is more of a tactical committee that's focusing on feature requests and bugs that are of greatest concerns, things like that. So the Informatics Committee will allocate resources, while the Users Committee can kind of tell us how those resources should be used at a finer level. And then obviously there's feedback between the committees and between the water data staff and the two committees as well. And this is a really good opportunity if you're at a member university especially to get involved, but even if you're not a member university, we like having outside voices heard, especially if you're an expert on informatics. So great. We have a few agency representatives on the Informatics Committee that can advise us on the best approaches technologically to different quandaries that we find ourselves in. And the Users Committee is another. I work with the Users Committee a lot. I really like that committee because it's a little bit more diverse, where we have some more senior people on that committee, but we also have graduate students as well. So that's definitely a fun group to be involved with, because they have probably varying views of what features should come next, I guess, in what we're developing. So these are definitely opportunities, like I said, hopefully for you to get involved if you're interested. Now, the technology I'm going to talk about today is the Hydrologic Information System, which was developed within the CUAHSI community. It was led by principal investigator at the University of Texas, Austin, but it involved a number of other universities as well. And what the goal of this project is to be able to share water data like we share other data over the internet. So on the right here, we have, basically how, you go about browsing the web. You have you have a browser like Internet Explorer that you use to search Google for different web pages. And all those different web pages live on different servers, but Google catalogs them and enables you to find them, and then Internet Explorer allows you to view and browse all the different web pages out there. In our system here, We have Hydro Desktop is our main data explorer, and that searches something that we call Hydro Catalog or HIS Central. We kind of use those terms interchangeably. But Hydro Catalog goes out and catalogs all the different sources of water data that have registered with within our system. And then Hydro Desktop searches Hydro Catalog, and then Hydro Desktop can go out and grab data from all these different data sources out there. And what we call this is a services-oriented architecture, and that means it's using web services, which are software that enable data to be transmitted over the internet. So it's a computer application that can request data from a database that then have that data returned to whatever is doing the request. So HIS Central is an actual, not just a database, we have an actual website for it where you can look at the different data sources that are registered within the system. And this is one of those data sources. It's an experimental watershed in northern Utah. So, like I said, it has all the different metadata that allows search and discovery, but each data source also gets a public web page, so it's a little bit of branding and information as well. And we've put this in the Microsoft Azure cloud. This is one of the pieces that we've put into the cloud. And as you can see, each page, has some what we call data source or data service level metadata, and that includes the address of the server. It includes some statistics, such as the number of locations where there are measurements, geographic extent. Publishers have the option of entering more information like an abstract or keywords or a suggested citation for the data as well. Hydro Desktop is another one of those, one of the pieces of the triad there. We've talked about this one now. Now we're going to talk about this one, then I'll come to this one. And Hydro Desktop is an open source GIS. It needs to be installed on Windows, so sometimes that is a drawback for some users, but it's a great free and open source piece of software that has GIS capabilities such as bringing in shape files and coverages. You can bring in different base maps, and more importantly, you can also download data from our catalog. So Hydro Desktop uses those web services that I talked about, allows you to search for data on HIS Central, then it can download those data from the different Hydro servers. And you do this by selecting where, what, when, who, such as different data sources. Then you click search. It returns the search results, so then you can browse the search results and decide what data you want to download. And I'll show a quick demo of this later on. But if you want to download Hydro Desktop, you can just go to hydrodesktop.org. It also includes documentation and talks about how you could potentially get involved developing if you're so inclined. And the last piece of the HIS triad is the Hydro server. And at its very core, what a Hydro server is a database. The observations data model is our information model that we use, as well as the web services, which allow data to be requested and then transmitted using a XML, a type of language that's becoming a standard for water data called WaterML. And I'm going to be going into this in much more detail than the other two. And Hydro Server, so like I said, this is at its core, this is what it is. But Hydro Server, there's actually been tools developed that expand its capabilities to include the ability to store and view GIS data on that server through a website. So we haven't gotten this far with our development in the cloud, but these are some of the tools that have been developed for people. If you want to host your own Hydro server, and I see Randy has a question here, who typically hosts the Hydro server database? Historically, it's been individual researchers or individual researchers at a university that has an IT department that can maintain their server. What we are now offering is free hosting in the cloud, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But one of the things that is really great about Hydro Server and about this system is that if you want to host your own data, we are still enabling and allowing you to do that. And you have all these open source tools available to you, like I said, we haven't gotten that far with our cloud development, but the end goal is to be able to have the same functionality where you can have, obviously storing both your ongoing data collection, your historical data in terms of time series data, but also have this web presence where you have a web page where you can view some of the data and you can look at the different GIS layers that are associated with the data as well. So I'm going to keep going, and if I see a question that is, so yeah, it's SQL Server 2008. I'm going to keep going throughout the presentation. If I don't get your question while we're going through it, we'll try to come back to it at the end. And, I started with the triad, just the simple triangle of the 3 different pieces of software, but what we really end up having is a much more complex ecosystem that's distributed and loosely connected, all by HIS Central, or HIS Central Catalog. So we have federal agencies such as USGS NWIS or NASA NLDAS, really, really big data sets that we go out and catalog and make available through search with Hydro Desktop. But we also have different ODM databases that are being hosted by individuals that have registered within our system as well. And then obviously we have what CUAHSI is hosting in the cloud. So all these data sources are brought together by HIS Central, and then they're brought to you by data access clients such as Hydro Desktop. And then you search HIS Central, you get your search results back, and then you can go out and request the data from each individual data source. So as many of you probably on the call already know, water data presents a bunch of unique challenges, and these are just a few of them that we identify here internally. One of them is that, in our catalog alone, we have 4,000 different types of identifiable information, and that means we have 4,000 different things being measured in our catalog. So that ranges from, dissolved oxygen to temperature to much more complex chemicals that, I'm not really that familiar with. So, but we divide it up into basically 3 categories, and those are chemical, biological, and physical. Water data is very interdisciplinary in nature, so data are often used by many different disciplines, and having people in those different disciplines talk so they understand each other and having the data speak to people from the different disciplines can be challenging. And also that there's so much real-time data. That is also a challenge where you're constantly bringing in new data, constantly bringing in new data. And the data, of course, can be used for different purposes, such as scientific inquiry, decision support, as well as education and outreach. And so these challenges are some of the things that are informing our work here internally at the WDC. And what we're trying to do in terms of helping you is improve tools for specifying metadata. So this, speaks to the interpretability of the data and the data reuse. We have rapidly evolving data formats and standards. If you upload your data to our storage and you're planning on keeping it there, that's something that we're promising our users, is that we will always make sure that your data complies with the standards of now and the standards of the future. Again, we're funded to take on the cost of data storage, so oftentimes projects will end in terms of funding, and there's nowhere for data to live, so that's something that we're hoping that we can help with, where we can provide that data storage and persistently as well. And then again, semantic mediation, this is speaking to cross-domain discovery. So if you have your data set that you've created and you've published and you want people to be able to use it, then hopefully we can help someone from a completely different discipline use your data as well, if it's helpful for them. And then also with that, hopefully provide a meaningful way for them to cite it as well, so you get credit for sharing your data, as well as obviously creating it and sharing it. From where I'm sitting, I'm the primary point of contact for our users, and I see 2 levels of data management needs. One is top-down, where NSF is, forcing people to share their data because it's publicly funded, so it should be publicly available. But there's also this bottom-up attitude where there's a desire to share and reuse data between individual researchers. So I'm calling that kind of a peer-to-peer network of people wanting to share their data. So NSF has a data management requirement now. I believe it was enacted in 2011, and there's 4 major components to this. Data inventory, what are you collecting? Data and metadata standards, how are they being represented and stored? How are the data being represented and stored so that they can be interpreted? Data use, privacy, and sharing policies. So, who can use the data? Is it openly available? As well as data lifecycle management, which is, everything from data creation to the QA/QC process, as well as what's the long-term storage plan for these data. And this is something that if you need help with, we're here to help you with this for sure. We have sample language on our website that's available, but we also oftentimes work one-on-one with researchers so that they're comfortable when they're submitting their data management plan that it'll be hopefully what the NSF is looking for. And so hopefully you're funded for that project. And just to kind of drive this home, that NSF is not only looking for this, but looking for new tools to enable this. This is one of the feature requests that came down from them, and it's a feature on HIS Central that allows you to search for a summary report of data based upon a granting agency and grant number. Now, this is in an NSF agency, or NSF right here, but I wanted to show this because this is one of the ones that we actually have live in our in HIS Central right now. This was a Pennsylvania EPA grant that allowed someone to compile data and upload it into HIS. And so what you can see here is that you just get some summary statistics, but then you can copy the URL, copy and paste the URL right into your report. And one of the great, hopefully, benefits of this in the long run is that we're going to be able to eliminate or at least shrink, this dark data that are down here. Where if you're not familiar with the long tail of science, the premise is that a lot of money goes to a few amount of people, and those people likely have the ability to store their data longer or better than some of the other people that are getting less money. So once you get out to this long tail, you're getting less money for in terms of, so you have number of grants, more grants, but less money. And then these people are likely the ones that are struggling to find what to do with their data in the long run. And hopefully we can kind of be a place where they can stick their data and forget about it if they wish, instead of sticking their data on a hard drive in their office and forgetting about it there. Now, the other data sharing that I talked about was peer-to-peer, and this is really about data reuse, data validation, and verification. And one of the things that really influenced the development of this system was that a poll indicated that university researchers were using 2/3 of their time searching, downloading, and reformatting their data, and only 1/3 doing the actual science or the actual analysis on that data. So this is something that we're trying to change. And hopefully, we're succeeding in the fact that, this one guy here who's just absolutely overjoyed because he can request data from all these different sources through one search. And one search, specifying location or what's being measured, stuff like that. So it's pretty common things rather than having to go to the USGS website, then go to the EPA website, then go to the NWS website. And how we're doing this data standardization is by using an information model, which I've generalized here. Basically, you have your observations in the middle and a table in the middle, and they're related to a bunch of metadata, including where things are being measured, who's making the measurements, what's being measured, and how it's being measured. We also use controlled vocabularies. So, for instance, what is being measured needs to match one of the variables in our CV. So we don't want people calling things by the same things by different names. So this is all community driven as well. I moderate this so people can submit new terms, submit deletions, submit edits as wanted, and then we review that and improve or reject as needed. And then here I have a screenshot of WaterML1, which is what we're using right now, but we're building towards using WaterML2, which is becoming a global standard through the Open Geospatial Consortium, and it's also under review by the World Meteorological Organization as well. So I'm going to go through two use cases now. The first one being static data. So kind of like what I was talking about there with the long tail of scientific data. I have a spreadsheet of data. I'm done with my field observations. What can I do with it? And what we help people do is publish that into our system, hopefully in a sustainable way. And this is the workflow for it. So you gather your data. You format your data and metadata to comply with our information model. We have a database, an ODM database, that's usually on a SQL server. This is the piece that we can handle if you don't want to handle it. Then you load your data into this database. You configure a web service. Again, this is another piece that we handle if you don't want to handle. You register that web service with HIS Central, and that allows HIS Central to go out and harvest the metadata. So it's like a web crawler, the way Google sends out these robots to crawl the web and gather information from all the different web pages. We send out a crawler to all these different sources that are registered with HIS Central. And once those metadata are harvested by HIS Central, the data becomes discoverable in clients like Hydro Desktop. So again, here I just want to emphasize again that we are providing these hosting services now for free, and it's in a virtual environment. So we own very little infrastructure relative to the amount of data that is actually in our catalog, and we're using this cloud technology, specifically Windows Azure, because of improvements to scalability and reliability. Cost is calculated based on usage, so we can use as much as we need, or not use as much, or not use more than we need. And we've chosen the Microsoft Azure Cloud basically because all of these tools were developed in a Microsoft environment in the first place. So the thought process behind that was that the port would be easier than moving to a different cloud. Now I'm going to do a relatively quick demonstration of the new uploading tool that we have for Azure. So when you log on, this is what the landing page that you're met with. When you have the different tables of ODM here, the different templates that we have, and then the number of values that are currently in the database for each. And you'll see these two each have 1 in them just because that is the default value. So both of these are the one row that are in the database is a default, no method specified. So if we go through each tab, first is contact. We wake up here. So this is pretty self-explanatory where actually we have a link to feedback. So a form for feedback, it's just a Google Doc. And then a spreadsheet with that feedback so you can see if there's other feedback in there. Maybe you don't want to repeat what someone else has already said, or you want to see what other people are saying. And then this is our location, my email address, and then if you come across a bug, you can go here to report a bug on GitHub. The Manage tab just allows you to delete data at this point. The Templates tab, so these are the different templates you use for uploading. These are all CSV format files. And then we have an Excel guide that's color-coded that shows what tables and what fields are mandatory while which ones are optional. And then we have a user guide here that explains how to use this uploading tool. These are just simple links to the controlled vocabularies. And then when you're ready to actually upload data, you can go to Import CSV Data and you choose your template. I'm just going to drag and drop a sites file onto here, and then I start the upload. And now this brings us to a validation step where the uploader is checking the metadata headers as well as the contents of the different cells to make sure they comply with our information model. And so hopefully in a minute here we'll get a return, although live demos always make me a bit nervous. So here you can see we have 4 tabs. New records, so things that are not in the database that are ready to be committed. and you could just commit them from right here. Rejected rows, updated rows, and duplicate rows. So rejected rows is kind of a new feature from the old uploader that we have, where hopefully this is giving us a little bit better feedback than we used to have. So here you can see I forgot to enter a site code, so this is telling me that can't be empty, so I need to go back and fix that. And so this is telling me I forgot another required field, which is site type, and so you can see it's empty here. If I wanted to download the CSV of these rejected entries, I could download as a CSV here. And like I was saying, whenever I was ready, I could just commit the changes. I'll forget about the rejected ones for now. And the records are successfully added to the database. So if I go back to my home tab, I can see that I've uploaded 233 sites. If I go to view data and view sites, I can actually look at those sites. And so once you upload a number of rows, you can have much more data in there, obviously. So this is another database that I have in the cloud where I have 37 sites, 6 variables, 910 different data values. And I could go in and view the different metadata by table. So this, for instance, was a data set from the Global Rivers Observatory, which is a project out of Woods Hole. Now, here's a table. I'm going to go through this relatively quickly because I'm running out of time here. These are the required tables for the Azure uploader. We have variables, what's being measured, methods, how it's being measured, sites, where it's being measured, sources, who's making the measurements, quality control, and the actual data values or observations. Now, use case number 2 would be real-time data. I have or will have data streaming in from field sites to a base computer. What can CUAHSI do for me? And so this gets a little bit more complicated in terms of the workflow, but you have the ODM database, you configure the web service, register it with HIS Central, but now you're installing a piece of software called the ODM Streaming Data Loader on the base computer. You have to map the native fields to your ODM fields, and then once you have data sent in, you schedule the ODM database updates as a Windows automated task. So the ODM gets updated periodically, and then it gets harvested. If there's any new metadata each week, HIS Central will find it, and then it becomes discoverable in Hydro Desktop. And yes, the PowerPoint will be available, and as well as the recording. So again, just to review what the data center can provide for you: adherence to standards, cloud storage for free if you're at an academic institution, and again, we're funded to deal with issues of long-term data persistence where most projects aren't. And we're also working towards interoperability with other systems for earth science data, such as GEOS and other water data catalogs, using the Water ML2 standard. And now, once you have your data in our system, this is how most common way to access it is Hydro Desktop, which I'm showing here. So you can zoom in to a specific region where you want to search. You can draw a rectangle to search, or you could bring in a coverage. If you had a study area you wanted to use specifically, you could bring in a coverage to search over. You specify what is being measured. I'm going to do all, so everything that's being measured in that area, as well as a time range. And what this is going to return is the number of sites. So this is only metadata. At this point, you have no data values. You only have metadata. So you have sites, and you can see what's being measured there and who's making the measurements. So this is a NASA data source that's being looked at right now. The first one was GHCN. This is a local watershed association, another NASA site here. And you can actually open up an attribute table for each data source and browse the different sites. And this becomes pretty important when you're talking about reviewing the metadata to make sure that you have the appropriate data for whatever your end goal is. So you can review the different metadata. You can see there's what's being measured, the number of values, the data types. So if it's sporadic or continuous measurement, or a lab sample or field observation, you can sort by these different headers. You can also do a text search, or a text filter, probably is a more true way to describe it. You can highlight the time series that you want to download, go out, download those time series from the individual data server, the individual Hydro server that's holding the data. Then this should have, so the rest of this demo showed how you could graph and then look at the actual table values, but it seems to have frozen. But the point is you can graph them in Hydro Desktop, and then you can look at the actual table numerical values, and you can export the data values to common data types like a CSV file or a text file. Now I'm going to conclude about probably 3 or 4 minutes here with examples of data publication. The first one that I talked about way back at the beginning of the presentation is the Shale Network. I'd encourage you to check it out. It's a pretty interesting project, shalenetwork.org. It's funded by NSF to bring together different groups to aggregate data and then analyze the data to see if there's any discernible impact of fracking in the region. And the different sources that they're getting data from are academic research projects, local governments, citizen scientists, as well as industry. So that's one of the things that I think makes this project really unique. You're getting data from all these different people, and they're formatting it to comply with our information model, and that data standardization is enabling their own analysis, as well as the maybe analysis by somebody else that's not even included in the project that's looking at their data as well as other data that are available as well. And CUAHSI supports this project through user support, so I spend a considerable amount of time with them, as well as we actually host their database as well in the cloud. And these are all the different points of observations that they have here. These are symbolized by a number of observations at each site. So you can see here they have a few sites that have many observations, so probably in the thousands, hundreds of thousands, while most of these are grab samples, so there may be less than 10 observations at a point. And obviously this is following the shale area, which is being used for the fracking in the area. Another example I like to use is the Ipswich River Watershed Association, which is Ipswich River is just a few miles north of where we are here. And if you can see here, there's a number of sites going up and down the river that they're mostly looking at dissolved oxygen and temperature and just trying to get some gauge of the health of the stream. And they basically came to us saying they didn't have anywhere to put their data. They wanted to be able to share their data. Could we help them with them? And we said, yes, of course. We'd like to make your data available. The last example I'm going to talk about is the Little Bear River Experimental Watershed, which is research being done at Utah State University. And they're looking at short-term variability related to mixed agricultural, related to land use in the area. And this is a really good example because Jeff Horsborough, who's the one leading this effort, developed a lot of the really great products that are used in HydroServer. And he has the HydroServer website all set up, and he has the GIS portion and a couple other features that we're not quite using yet in the cloud. And you can see here, this is a screenshot of the website. You can see there's a little map of his study area. Then if you looked in Hydro Desktop, you could also create the map of the watershed, and you can see his sites, the different sites going up and down the stream here. Now, one last thing I want to bring up, which is a little bit unrelated, but I want to make a plug for anyway, since this is CUAHSI is one of the leading people on this Cyberseminar. We're offering a new spatial data publication service. So if you have data that is going to be included is included or going to be included in a peer-reviewed article that's accepted for publication, we will take that data and host it and make it available in the cloud using ArcGIS. And this is the live website for this right now. We are going to be offering DOIs for this as well. So it's the type of thing where if you have not, if you've gotten your article accepted, but you have the data and you want to include a DOI in your article specifically for your spatial data, then that's something that we could help you do. But this is the prototype for it, and we're openly accepting more people here. to use this service. And we're not really, what we can handle right now is basic coverages. We're not really ready for temporal geospatial data quite yet, but you can see here we have soil porosity percentage, permeability, these different data layers, and you can zoom in. And if you have any questions about this, please do feel free to follow up after this presentation. Kristen Levine, one of our newer staff members, has been doing some really great work on this. Lastly, I just want to give you an idea of what we're working on the next couple months. We're looking to release a web-based data access client in time, at least a prototype in time for AGU. So we're going to hopefully eliminate the need to download Hydro Desktop on a Windows machine. So hopefully anyone can just open up a web browser and download data the way that we're enabling people to publish their data like that. So right now, as you saw, you just open up a web browser and you can upload your CSV files. We're looking to improve data management tools. Right now, we have very, very primitive data management tools for, such as for QC/QA. Then we're also looking to build an API for posting data in real time for our Azure hosting, which we haven't quite gotten to yet. So with that, thank you very much for your attention. And at this time, I think we'll take questions.
Okay, thank you, Jon, for your presentation. It was very informative, and it sounds like there's a lot going on at the Water Data Center right now. So I've been seeing some really great questions coming in the chat box, and at this time, if anyone else has additional questions, you can go ahead and type them into that chat box. And Jon, I'll just start throwing some questions over to you.
All right.
Okay, so Amy Schuler had asked a while back, is the WDC, whoops, the chat box just moved, is the WDC harvested by Data One?
At this point, I don't believe it is. But that, Data One is a group that we've interacted with. I think there's going to be a lot of barriers broken down for interoperability once a lot of people, including us, move towards WaterML2, because that's going to kind of drive the metadata information model, and I see a lot of doors being opened at that point, just because it's going to be such an openly adopted standard. It's something that, for instance, the USGS, I believe, already has some WaterML2 endpoints out there. So hopefully that will drive more interoperability, not just between the agencies, but between the different academic groups as well.
Okay. And Randy S. had asked for information regarding the hosted options for end users, such as provisioning, storage size, availability, and management, and things like that.
So we're doing the provisioning on demand right now. Storage size, we're still playing around with how to deal with larger data sets. We have a data set right now from Glion, which is between 1.5 and 2 gigabytes, and we've ran into some performance issues with that. But that's really in terms of data retrieval. In terms of data storage, I don't think there's really a cap on that. The one thing I will say right now that is a hiccup that we're hoping to improve is right now we only have one-to-one database to user access. So we're using Gmail or Google accounts to authenticate into the system right now, and so only one Google account can be associated with one database at a time. Now, that's not ideal. We know that a lot of people are collaborating and working in groups, so that's something that's on the short list for the Hydro server in Azure, is to be able to have different levels of access for the databases and be able to have kind of a database administrator be able to delegate certain privileges to more than one user.
Okay, and
Randy, I see Randy. I'll be the initial point of contact. So my email is up on the slide right now, but I'll type it into the chat box again here. So definitely feel free to shoot me an email.
All right, awesome. And then there's another question from MSU. Can data uploaded to Hydro server in the cloud be embargoed for a specified length of time?
So right now, all data in our system is open, but that doesn't mean that it has to be registered with HIS Central. And let me explain that difference, where we can basically allocate you a database in Azure that you can upload data to, but you don't have to necessarily register that database with HIS Central. So when someone searches in Hydro Desktop, they won't be able to find it, but it still will be somewhat viewable on the internet. So if someone was really technically savvy, they might be able to find it, but it's not going to be visible anywhere with our system. And we could probably even set up databases that don't have web services at all, so that in that way they would be embargoed in the way that there's no outside access to them. And then we could certainly open it up when you gave the go-ahead.
Okay, Brittany McCall asks, do you have an idea of the number of users searching HydroLab?
I'm not sure what HydroLab is, but in terms of Hydro Desktop, we get probably on the orders of hundreds of downloads of the software a month. So we have a pretty good user base for that. We're looking at, in terms of catalog downloads, we're looking at somewhere between tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of downloads per month, something like that.
Okay, and then Amber Jones asks, can CUAHSI host data for anyone? Is it just CUAHSI members, or what about local municipalities?
So for academic institutions, yes, it's just yes for academic institutions. For local municipalities or nonprofits, we kind of take that on a case-by-case basis, but we want to get as much data access for our users as we can. So we try to say yes, but obviously that balances against the workload and the resources that we have available to us. So we try to say yes to as much as we can, but sometimes we have to either say no or delay.
And another question from MSU. When do you anticipate being able to handle temporal geospatial data in HydroPub?
So I would say that's probably months away. This is kind of our first go at it, and that's something that we've had a request for already. So if we do get many requests for that, that's something that we might be able to slide up on the priority level. But I'll say right now I don't think we're actively working on it. So it would probably take a week or so for us to actually spec it out, and then month or months to actually incorporate into that. So hopefully by early next year, unless we hear people slamming on the door and asking for it.
Okay, great. So there are a few more questions to get to, and then if anyone else has one more question, go ahead and enter it into the chat box, and we'll start to wrap things up. Leah Edelman asks, do you handle biological information like macroinvertebrates, fish, mollusks, etc.?
We can, certainly, especially if it's a tax account. That's something that we can do because that's set up just like any other time series would be, and that's really what this system is designed for, is time series data and kind of archetypical type of data that was envisioned was the USGS stream gauge. So there can be some challenges actually with biology, but also chemical as well. So grab samples, sometimes people aren't satisfied with the amount of metadata that we can handle in this particular information model. But we can incorporate that, and as we move forward, there are new information models such as ODM2 that are coming out that will likely help us handle different types of data better.
Okay, and a question from Bronco Kirkes. How will real-time data be treated differently compared to regular data?
So that's a good question. What we're thinking initially is to build an API which basically either accepts or rejects a post. Instead of having this detailed user feedback that we have here with the static data that I showed, at least the first cut at an API for real-time posting is going to be a little more primitive probably, where it either accepts the post or rejects it, and hopefully gives you some idea behind why it's been rejected. But Bronco, feel free, we can talk about that offline sometime if you're interested.
Excellent. And then another question from MSU. Can you share a link to the HydroPub website?
So I can paste that into the chat box here, but please be aware this is going to likely change. Like I said, this is a bit of a prototype, and we're still coming up with naming conventions and stuff like that. So this is the first cut at it, but this URL is going to change because this specific project isn't going to keep the endpoint of /spatial data service. But at least for the next week or so, this link will definitely be live. And even when this link isn't live, we'll make sure it forwards to something where you can, something useful. It won't be just a dead link.
Okay, thanks for the link. And Carolina asks, do you manage HydroServer Lite, or is that separate from CUAHSI?
So we are a little bit more on the peripheral of HydroServer Lite. That's being led out by Brigham Young University. And I mean, I can certainly help you get more information about that, but we are not leading the development on that.
Okay, I'm going to take these last two questions that are in the chat box, and then we will finish up. So Josh Cole says, does ODM2 have a release date?
So I believe the actual schema and everything is out on GitHub. In terms of us adopting it, we have not set a date for that. That would likely be next year sometime, but I believe the schema and accompanying documentation is available on the ODM2 GitHub site.
Okay, and Samuel says, is Hydro Desktop able to do hydrologic modeling work?
So one of the great things about Hydro Desktop is that, you know, like I said, it's open source, but it's also extensible. And what I mean by that is that people can develop add-ons to the software, and one of the add-ons does, I believe, have some modeling component to it, but we are not currently supporting that. That was an open source project that was contributed, and I'm not quite exactly sure about the status of that, but there was one tool that was developed at some point, and if you go to hydrodesktop.org, I think you'll be able to find some information about that, but if not, again, feel free to shoot me an email with that question, and I can do a little bit digging for you.
All right. Well, thank you, John, so much for giving your presentation today on the CUAHSI Water Data Center. Thank you all for attending and asking some really great questions during the presentation. I do want to remind everyone one more time that we do have another virtual workshop presentation on Wednesday, October 1st. That's next week. And that will be from Wade Sheldon with the Georgia Coastal Ecosystems LTER network. That's at 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. And then again, if you'd like to participate in the virtual poster session that is the culmination of this virtual workshop series, please submit your abstracts to CUAHSI by September 30th. In order to be considered for participation. Your posters actually don't need to be submitted until October 15th. So if you're worried about not having a poster ready, just go ahead, get your abstracts in, and then you do have a couple more weeks after the abstract submission deadline to get your posters in. And if you have any questions regarding the poster session or the virtual workshops, you can actually get in touch with me. My email is eclark@CUAHSI.org, and there's also a link to these workshops right from the CUAHSI homepage. So again, thank you for participating, and we hope to see you next week and during the poster session. Have a great afternoon.